Hello everyone, I'm CoolGuy, welcome back. Today's a quick video. I want to talk about Tether in PvP for Nightstalker, because on paper it's great, but in practice it has some issues. A lot of players play Tether like it's D1, and I've always found that you simply can't do that in D2, so I have some suggestions today, some things to try. The goal here is to help if I can. There's no set way to do it, but I do see some mistakes. The truth is, the Tether can be really good, but it can be just as bad. I want to break down what it does, how long it does it, and more, and talk about how to use it better. I want to start off with the clip here. I'm going to come back to it later, and this just really shows how clutch the Tether can be. There's a lot of moving parts in this clip. The situation, it's 4v4 in Trials of Osiris. The loser goes home. My wife just got back into Destiny. Big W. She's on top tree Tether. We noticed that the other team has two supers. Two supers to our one, and again, that's Tether for my wife. I told her if they get close, if they pop their super, no matter how far away they pop it, throw that Tether straight down at your feet. And this is what happened.
Guardian down.
Very good. And this is the game. Very good.
Tether 100% won the round. It was a perfect Tether as far as placement. But first, I want to talk about the animation, the delay, the distance, and the time. There are basic things that you need to know about the Tether that a lot of people aren't considering. And this is where I'm going to start getting into where things are wrong with Tether, things that need to be fixed. And after I talk about these, we're going to go through them, then we're going to talk about how to combat and counteract, and hopefully help some of the common mistakes that I see players making with Tether. First things first, for whatever reason, wherever you're aiming, the Tether goes to the right of where you're aiming. And I really wish that they would fix this, like Bungie please. Make the arrow come out center of screen exactly where you're aiming. Because as you can see, I'm clearly aiming at the wall, right at this bullet. When I pop Tether, do the animation, the bow comes out, it's snoping right by where I'm aiming. This is the first thing that you need to know, because when the super is popped, you're in that animation, whatever reason, your aim literally shifts to the right. It's almost jarring. It's a nuance you need to know. The magnetism of the Tether does correct this at times, but not at all times. You could be aiming at the center of your target, the animation and the Tether go to the right, but with the magnetism and the assist that you get from the super, the arrow ends up going straight. So the magnetism can't help. However, two things should be happening on your part. Number one, as you pop Tether, your aim, be ready for the off-center shift. Start moving the crosshair back left. The second thing, I can guarantee you that when you miss a Tether, it's to the right. Like if you could go back and look at all of the gameplay of Tethers that you've missed, I would bet that they're to the right. So even though we just talked about how you should be correcting it, and even though magnetism can come through and help it get back on target, it still has that off-center thing about it. And I tried to place this enemy about equal distance. As you can see, if you're starting to the right, the animation pops. The Tether ends up going even more right than where I'm aiming. But if you start left, you're basically tethering into the target, if that makes sense. It's important to know. Basically, you need to aim just a little bit left when you tether. Because if you're above your enemy and you shoot down at them, and let's say they shade step left, they're kind of doubling up to get away from it. You should always be controlling your reticle placement throughout the entire animation of the Tether, but always start left because it's going to push you to the right. There's a lot more that you need to know. It's just really important to understand, have this knowledge before we even start getting into the super. The second thing is that when the Tether is shot, there's a short hop animation every single time. A little jump, bring out the void bow, and shoot it. You have to take into account the time that that's taking. It's a big thing. I'm going to be coming back to it. Then you have to take into account that if the Tether does not directly impact an enemy, it's going to hit the wall, then it's going to activate when they're close. Then it will catch them with the Tether. It's a whole long drawn out deal. I'm using top tree right now. We're going to get into both trees, but even at an average distance, from the time it takes for the super to come out, hit the wall, then the Tether activates, it's over 2 seconds, at least 2 seconds, about 2.5 like most. It could be even longer depending on how far away they are. If it's right next to an enemy, it's 1.5 seconds, so a minimum of 1.5 seconds, but it's mostly going to average that 2 seconds, 2.5 before something actually gets tethered. You need to keep this in mind. I'm going to come back to it. As for the Tether trees, top tree Tether, when you shoot it onto a wall or onto the ground, it has two phases. The first phase is the trap. It lasts for 30 seconds. That's a very long time in game. After that, it goes into phase 2, and we're going to call that the activation phase. When it activates and goes off, it's going to stay there and last for 6 to 7 seconds. So a total of 37 seconds top tree is going to be up. Most of the time though, something's going to get tethered. And when it does, it goes immediately into that second phase, that activation phase. It's only going to last for 6 to 7 seconds. I've seen it last up to 10 seconds max, and actually in that clip, it's about 10 seconds. So it's just kind of weird. Sometimes It activates, it'll be on one target. I think it has to do if it catches another target within its window, it might give a little extra time. It has that quality, it's come up, but from testing and different things, it's about 6 to 7, at least minimum. I haven't seen it longer than 10 once the tether actually activates. With Top Tree, it starts to catch an enemy at about 12 meters, which by the way, in my opinion, that if something like Dune Marchers is getting 20, I think that we can agree that the Tether Super can get a little bit more distance as far as meters, but once tethered and they start backing up, it's gonna hold them past that for about a meter up to 13, and then it's gonna let go, but it's only gonna activate at 12 meters. With Top Tree, once it activates, again, it goes straight into phase 2, that activation phase, so forget about the 30-second trap. Once it activates, it lasts for 6 to 7 seconds, then it's gone. Bottom tree tether, Mobius Quiver. It's literally half, so instead of 12 meters catching a target, it catches them at 6 meters. And the shot immediately goes into phase 2. It's immediately in activation. So it grabs at 6 meters and it lasts for 6 to 7 seconds. Remember, with bottom tree, you can run around after you pop the first initial shot. You have heart of the pack, I'm gonna get into all that later. Another thing to know, we're gonna start getting into what actually happens when you tether an enemy. When you tether an enemy, their aim gets flinched. It literally gets shaken. You count on this, you need this. And while being tethered, another thing to know is that when you're taking damage by an enemy that is in your tether, you don't have a crit multiplier when you're taking damage, meaning that whatever a weapon's body shot damage is what it's gonna do for both head and body. And we're kind of building on what we need to do as we go on. It's all gonna come together. The next thing you need to know is how important invisibility is with Nightstalker when you're using tether. So the tether's gonna grab them. It's going to pull their aim, it's gonna shake their screen. And on their screen, there's the tether effect. It's loud, there's void on both sides. The screen's a little bit darker, it's almost smoky. When you're invisible, look at how that looks to a tethered player. It's pretty crazy, huh? So when you pop tether, immediately after you need to shade step on Top Tree, because shading on Top Tree makes you invisible. So what's happening is that once that tether goes off, their screen gets pulled off of you, and while that's happening, you're shade stepping going invisible. So they're trying to look for you, and then they get back to trying to track you. It is very tough when you're invisible. So I highly recommend that on Top Tree you have a shade step cooldown before you use tether, because you're gonna tether and immediately shade step every single time. On bottom tree, it gets kind of tough because of how short the tether catch is and how short the duration is. But in a perfect world, there are two things you should be doing. Number one is drop the smoke bomb at your feet before you're ready to tether someone, because this makes you go invisible. It also gives you heart of the pack ×1. So you're invisible running around. When you find your enemy, you hit them with the quiver shot. After you kill them, you're now in heart of the pack ×2, and then you go from there. Now the second way is you just maybe panic super someone or whatever it is, or maybe you just run up to someone, hit them with the quiver shot, you get the kill. That's heart of the pack ×1. You can still run around, you can still shoot another tether, but right after you get that first kill, you drop the smoke at your feet, you get heart of the pack ×2, but now you're invisible, and then you go tether the second person. Now we come to how to bring all this together with how everything works. The number one thing you need to be careful of is the in-air tether shot. Does this look familiar? Big double jump around a corner, throwing the tether down to hopeless enemies. Yeah, you know what you get when you even get the slightest in the air when you're using tether? Keep in mind, this is a 4-4 trials match, and the only super on the board is the enemy's tether. Cool. You're a sitting duck in D2. It holds you up there way too long, and with bottom tree, you end up being just committed to it. You're just suspended in the air. So when you go from the air, it needs to be a 100% sure thing. I pretty much never do it. There are times to do it, but most of the time, I just kind of stay away. Again, a lot of players play it like D1, and I don't know what it is about D2, but it takes an eternity to get everything going. Knowing what we know, when you jump way up in the air and the tether doesn't hit a target, remember, it may miss, so aim left in the first place, but by the time it takes you to double jump, the time it takes for the animation, the time it takes for the tether to come out, hit the wall, then activate. That's where a lot of players are going wrong running Nightstalker tether. Because out of the gate, when you do this from the air, it's at least 2 seconds before anything can happen. Even when you tag an enemy and kill an enemy and there's more around, a lot of the times you don't even make it back down to the ground. So if you are in the air and do this, it needs to be a sure thing. What I recommend is get it out as fast as possible. This means using the short hop animation. That means placing the tether on walls, on the ground. Like right here, I'm on bottom tree. This is the one that only connects at 6 meters. As Spectral Blades is coming, I turn around, I just shoot it right down at my feet, and I shade step. This is literally the best case scenario because if I jumped way up in the air like a lot of players do, try to actually hit him with the tether, Spectral blades are moving fast, it's all around the place, I'm stuck in the air trying to connect, I could miss and other enemies could just take me out. So even though I'm bottom tree here, I stop it, I get the kill, and I could even go shoot another tether if I wanted to. Or like right here with top tree. What I want to do, the D1 in me wants me to jump up around the corner, tether right down into B, but I know that that takes too long. I do the regular animation, I do the short hop, I throw it up on the ceiling. The top tree can last for 30 seconds, so this is a very heavy point. There's a lot of traction in this area. So even though it's right here, look how far it can tether. So again, I recommend that since it all takes so much time, the aim's kind of off in the very first place, tether from the ground as much as you can. When a super's coming at you, instead of doing that big backup, double jump in the air, big double jump to tether on the ground, literally look straight at the ground, tether the ground, and shade step backwards. Get it out of the way. There are a couple things that I wish were better about Nightstalker Tether and a couple things that I would fix. First, the aim thing, like just fix that first and foremost. But the second thing, just speed up the process a little bit. It all takes way too long. Because Tether isn't really the best super in the game. Like, it does have shining moments, but other than those, we kind of work with what we have. The main things, again, be as grounded as possible, throw it on walls, objects on the ground in front of you. It doesn't have to be spectacular because you can use it as a pivot point. And going back to that starting clip, first thing we noticed is that the tether is perfect, the placement is perfect. I'm gonna walk through that, but she did do that big jump in the air, and shocker, she didn't make it back down on the ground. We talked about it. But with where she placed it, it tagged literally as I shot the first one, so I got a body shot. The second one was in super, it got taken out, their aim and screen was off, so I got them. Now, the third one is the best one, it's the most interesting. That one got taken out of super too, because once I find them, they've already got shots into me. The tether literally caught them while they were shooting, and you can see the actual moment where the tether grabbed and shook their aim off of me and made me win the gunfight. Like, tether won that round. Tether can be really good. You just have to know how to use it and what its limitations are. Mostly it just takes a lot of time for everything to get done. When you throw a tether, you need to think 2 seconds ahead. Literally think 2 seconds ahead, not right in the moment. That's the best advice I can give you. So you kind of use it as a trap. Always shade step when you're done throwing the tether and be in the air as little as possible. Now with bottom tree, the quiver, you can be mobile. It's a one-shot bow with a slight delay. That's how I kind of think of it. Just try not to be suspended in the air. Only warlocks can do that. You might be able to run around like I'm literally running right into enemies, pressing my super button and then bowing the first enemy. Maybe if I go invisible, I can come around a corner with a double jump to kind of rain down a bow at that point, but just know its limitations. I hope that you found the video helpful. Remember to rate it, good or bad, it helps me out tremendously. Subscribe if you aren't already. Let's talk about it down below. Thank you guys for watching, and until the next one, I am CoolGuy.